I'm blind. A famous pianist mocked me until I played and silenced the world. Welcome back with a new real shock story. Before we start, comment and tell me which city you're watching from. ATV end, don't forget to subscribe and rate it from 0 to 10. Let's enjoy the story, everyone. It all started the night I never expected to change my life. I remember walking backstage, my hands brushing along the curtain's edge, feeling the worn fabric under my fingertips. The hum of voices behind me was distant, but I felt them like vibrations that traveled through the floor and into my chest. My heart was pounding, and I could not tell if it was because of excitement or because something inside me was warning me that tonight would be different. For years I had lived with silence. Not the peaceful kind, but a silence that shaped every part of who I was. People looked at me and saw what I could not hear. They whispered that I was fragile, that I couldn't possibly compete in a world built for sound. They did not know that music was my language, that the piano was how I spoke when words failed. My fingers had learned to tell stories the way voices never could. But still, I carried doubts. Quiet ones. The kind that creep in when people laugh at your dream before you even say it aloud. Tonight, I was about to stand in a hall filled with people who would listen to me, whether they believed I deserved it or not. I was supposed to be ready. I thought I was. Backstage, the air was electric. Performers were moving in and out, some glowing with pride, others brushing away nervous sweat. I heard laughter nearby, sharp cutting. I knew it wasn't just normal chatter. It was deliberate. I moved closer, guided by instinct, and then I heard it clearly. The words, "They let her perform here? She can't even hear a note." It was him, the famous pianist, the one everyone had come to see, the one whose name filled the hall with expectation. His voice was low but mocking, the kind that leaves a sting. I could feel it before I even understood it fully, like cold air brushing my skin, my hands clenched without thought. I swallowed. I wanted to turn away. I wanted to tell myself it didn't matter. But it did matter. That moment became a turning point I could not ignore. It was not just about the music anymore. It was about proving that no one could decide what I was capable of except me. When they called my name, the applause came. Not loud, but polite. I stepped forward slowly, feeling every footstep through the soles of my shoes. The stage lights hit me like a wave, and I froze for a heartbeat. This was it. I could still feel the words backstage, hanging in the air. I could feel him watching, waiting, judging. I sat down at the piano bench. My fingers hovered over the keys, and I closed my eyes. I told myself, this is my story. This is my moment. My breath steadied. My hands pressed down. The first note came like a declaration, and in that instant, I felt the weight of everything, the doubt, the mockery. The years of silence fall away. The music became my voice. It was not just sound. It was every emotion I had ever held inside. The applause stopped. The murmurs quieted. And in the stillness, I kept playing. The notes came faster now, carrying more than melody. They carried anger, defiance, pride, and a fierce kind of hope. I could sense the shift in the hall. People were leaning forward, drawn in. I could feel the air change, heavier now, charged with something I could not name. Then I heard it, the faintest movement beside me, his breathing. The pianist was watching, not just watching, but leaning in, as though he was realizing something he had never thought possible. I played harder, letting every ounce of myself pour into the music. And for a moment, I forgot everything else. I forgot the mocking words. I forgot the fear. There was only me and the sound that no one else could touch the way I did. But when the final chord rang out, it wasn't applause that came first. It was silence. A silence so complete, it almost felt like the world was holding its breath. Then the hall erupted, not with laughter, but with something much stronger: respect, shock. Standing applause that shook the walls. I rose from the bench, my hands still trembling. The pianist was gone. The curtain fell, the noise faded. But something had changed inside me, inside them. Because I knew in my heart that this night was not just about me. It was about every voice silenced by doubt, every dream mocked before it could speak. And somehow I had broken through. That night, I didn't just play the piano. I proved something far greater. But I didn't know yet how far the ripple of that moment would go. After the curtain fell, I stood there for a long moment, breathing hard. The applause still echoed in my ears, but I barely heard it. My mind was somewhere else backstage, in the laughter I'd heard before, in the pianist's mocking tone, and in the silence that followed my last note. That silence felt heavier than any words. It wasn't just the hush of surprise. It was something deeper. It was the sound of a truth no one could ignore anymore. I walked off the stage without looking back. My legs felt unsteady. My heart was still pounding. Backstage was chaos, people moving, talking, applauding quietly, but I felt removed from it all. I wanted to find somewhere quiet to breathe and think. I ducked behind a curtain, away from the crowd, and let myself collapse against the wall. My knees hit hard, but I didn't care. I was still shaking, not from fear now, but from the weight of everything that had just happened. Somewhere in the distance, someone was talking about the performance. She silenced him, I heard. That phrase stayed with me, like a whisper that refused to fade. Silenced him. The idea made my chest tighten. I had not planned to prove anything tonight, not really. I just wanted to play. But somehow, in the middle of that music, I had spoken louder than any argument, louder than mockery, louder than doubt, and they heard it. Later, I found myself sitting alone in the dressing room. My hands still tingled from the performance, my fingers aching as if they had carried the weight of the world. I pulled my bed closer, leaning against the wall. Outside, I could still hear the faint hum of applause from the hall, mixing with murmured conversations. People were talking about me now, some in admiration, some in disbelief, others in quiet shame, I suspected. I thought about what had happened earlier, the laughter, the doubt. It wasn't just one person mocking me. It was the truth about how the world often treats people who are different. How quickly they decide we can't measure up. How easily they dismiss us without giving us a chance. That night, in front of all those people, I realized it wasn't only about proving them wrong. It was about showing everyone that silence does not mean weakness. That being underestimated doesn't make you powerless. And yet, I couldn't ignore the truth that this would not end here. My story was now in their hands. The pianist's expression that night, whatever he was feeling, was proof that something had shifted. But change doesn't happen in one moment. It's a slow tide, a ripple that needs to keep moving forward. And I knew my performance was just the first drop. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about every note, every breath, every heartbeat I'd poured into that performance. I thought about the people in the audience who had heard something in me they had never expected. I thought about the ones who still wouldn't believe until they saw it for themselves. By morning, I knew I had a choice. I could let this moment fade, pretend it was just another night, or I could use it, not for fame, not for revenge, but to give voice to every person who had been told they were silent. To stand not just for myself, but for all of us who had been overlooked. That choice would shape the rest of my life. Because the truth was clear, I was no longer just a girl who played the piano. I was a girl who had challenged the world, and I could never go back to silence. But what I didn't know yet was just how far that challenge would take me, and I couldn't imagine where it would lead. The days after that night felt like living in a dream I couldn't wake from. Everywhere I went, people seemed to look at me differently. Some smiled with quiet pride. Others stared with something I couldn't quite read: curiosity, doubt, maybe even disbelief. I kept replaying that night over and over in my head, the sound of the last chord still echoing in my mind like a heartbeat that refused to stop. But the reality was, not everyone wanted to hear my story. That became clear the moment I stepped into the music hall again, this time for a rehearsal. The air backstage was colder somehow, the laughter sharper, the glances more pointed. It wasn't just the pianist now, it was a ripple effect. People began whispering again, not just about my performance, but about me. I could hear them, even without trying. I wasn't deaf to their voices. They weren't always cruel, but there was always something there. A doubt that clung to me. How could she do it? They murmured. She's blind. How can she play like that? The words stung, not because I was weak, but because I realized how deeply they still underestimated me. The next time I went on stage was different. I felt the weight of those whispers pressing down on me, heavier than any applause I'd ever received. I could almost feel the pianist watching from the shadows, like a storm gathering before a thunderclap. My hands trembled as I sat at the piano, but this time it wasn't fear that pulsed through me, it was determination. The first notes came out slowly, deliberately, as if I was testing them before letting them speak. But they didn't remain soft for long. They grew, pushed by something deeper than music, by years of silence, by every time someone told me I couldn't. The melody became sharper, more intense. Every chord was a defiance. Every note was a challenge. I didn't just play the piano that night, I fought with it. The music became a voice that no one could ignore, and I felt something shift in the crowd and myself. The laughter backstage before, the mocking glance was replaced with something else. Something I couldn't name yet. Respect? Astonishment? Fear? Maybe all of them. But then came the moment that changed everything. The pianist stepped forward, his face unreadable. He didn't clap. He didn't smile. He just watched me play. And the silence after that moment felt heavier than anything I had ever known. I finished the piece, my chest aching from the effort. The hall was quiet. No applause. No whispers. Just a stillness so deep it felt like the world itself was holding its breath. And then, quietly, slowly, someone stood up. Then another. Then the applause came, not polite or brief, but loud and certain, shaking the air like a wave breaking against stone. The sound wrapped around me, pulling tears to my eyes. I rose, my body trembling, but not from fear anymore. I had crossed something I didn't fully understand. I had stepped past doubt, past mockery, past silence. But I also knew this was not the end of the story. Because the truth was, this moment was no longer mine alone. It had become something bigger. Something that could not be erased. And deep down, I knew that the hardest part was yet to come. That night, I didn't just play music. I began something that would change everything. But I still didn't know exactly what that something was. That night stayed with me. I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying the moment the applause had risen slowly, then swelling into something unstoppable. It wasn't just about the music anymore. It was about proving something to myself. Something I hadn't realized I was carrying for years. That sense of being unseen, unheard, underestimated it. It wasn't just my own burden. It belonged to every person who had ever been silenced. The next morning, I woke to messages I wasn't prepared for. People I didn't know had reached out saying they had been in the audience, saying they were moved, saying my story mattered, but there were others too. Messages full of doubt, criticism, even mockery. They said I was lucky. They said it was a one-time thing. They said I shouldn't expect to be treated differently. Those words cut deeper than the applause, because the truth was, the fight wasn't over. Rehearsals became harder. Every time I sat at the piano, I felt eyes on me judging, waiting. The pianist, too, seemed different now. He no longer mocked openly, but there was a quiet intensity in his stare, a challenge in his silence. Every glance from him felt like a test, a silent demand for me to prove it again. And maybe I needed to, not for him, not for the crowd, but for myself. Weeks passed and the tension grew. The whispers backstage grew louder. People began talking about me more openly. Some supported me. Others questioned whether I deserved what I had earned. I could feel the divide forming, like a fault line in the air. And it terrified me, because this wasn't just about music anymore. This was about who got to have a voice and who got silenced. Then came the night that changed everything. The hall was packed. The air felt heavier, thicker. I could sense the tension before I even stepped on stage. The pianist was there, waiting, watching. The moment I sat at the piano, I felt a rush of everything. The fear, the doubt, the anger, the pride. My fingers touched the keys and the music began. This time, it wasn't about proving them wrong quietly. It was loud, bold. Every note was fire. Every chord was defiance. I wasn't just playing music. I was speaking without words. And in that moment, the air changed. The audience stopped whispering. They leaned in. They listened. Halfway through, I felt it the turning point. The pianist stepped forward, closer to the stage. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were fixed on me, and I knew something had broken inside him. Because I could see it, the realization that he could no longer silence me. And in that silence, I heard something powerful. Not applause yet, not even shock, but something heavier, the truth. That night, I didn't just face my biggest fear. I faced a truth I couldn't ignore. The fight to be heard wasn't over, and I was ready for what came next. When the last note faded, the hall stayed silent for a moment that felt endless. I sat there, hands trembling, chest pounding, unable to move. I could hear my own breathing loud, uneven, and somewhere in the distance, I heard a single sound, the first clap, then another, and another, until the room was filled with applause that felt bigger than just praise for music. It was an acknowledgement. I stood slowly, every muscle aching from what I had just done, and bowed. The applause didn't stop, but neither did the weight of what had happened. I had gone on that stage not knowing if I could silence the voices that doubted me. And somehow, in that moment, I had. Not just for myself, but for everyone who had ever been told they couldn't. For every voice that had been ignored. Later, backstage, it was quiet. The pianist wasn't there. I didn't know if he had left or was somewhere watching silently. I didn't care. What mattered was what had changed. I felt something inside me shift forever. I had proven something, though not to everyone, and I knew the fight wasn't truly over. But now I had found my voice, And that voice mattered. In the days that followed, the story spread. People talked about it, not just about me, but about what it meant. They debated it, shared it, questioned it. Some said it was a miracle. Others said it was just a performance. But for me, it wasn't about labels. It was about truth. This wasn't just my story. It was the story of so many who faced doubt, injustice, and silence. And it was proof that even when the world tries to silence you, the right moment, the right courage, can break through. Sometimes I wonder, how many more voices are still waiting to be heard? How many more people walk in silence because the world refuses to listen? The truth is, we will never know until someone dares to speak. And maybe that someone could be you.